So I've got a few comments and even a couple emails from some of the videos I post on this channel, especially the videos where we've done up to Sharpstone, where we fish a lot for big pike in the middle of summer. People have been a little bit curious about how exactly we're going about finding those big pike, the type of spots that we're fishing, kind of what we're doing. So I figured in this video today, I'd kind of show you my process before we go to these trips about how we find these big pike, because a lot of it actually comes before the trips at home, looking at Google Earth and satellite imagery. If you know what you're looking for, you can really narrow down your spots before you even get there. You can kind of already have a pre-plan before you even get to the lake, which can really make things a lot more efficient when you actually get there. It's a really easy process that I use anyway, that you can use on pretty much any lake in Canada. So I figured I'd show it to you here today in this video. So before I start actually dissecting this map, let me show you where I'm looking at here. So again, the last few years, we've gone up to a lake called Sharpstone, Northwest Ontario, which is right here. There's the pin for the Sharpstone Lake cabin, and this lake connects to this huge lake next to it called Moore. Both of these lakes are absolute world-class pike lakes. They're some of the best that I've ever fished, and they're just incredible, especially for trophy pike. But the lake I'm going to be looking at in this video to kind of dissect my process is going to be this one right here, which is right next to Moore and Sharpstone. So without burning my own spots, I feel like it's a good, reasonable comparison because it's in the exact same neighborhood. So this lake right here on Google Earth is called Pac-Man Lake. So everything I'm going to be doing in this video is just simply based off Google Earth satellite imagery, and I'm going to go through kind of a step-by-step breakdown of how I would approach this lake and look at it from Google Earth in the middle of summer to find big pike. So first step is figuring out the time of year that you're looking at. So for this is more tailored towards midsummer, so kind of mid-late June through early September. This is when the water temperature is the warmest they'll get all year. This is when the weeds have fully topped out. They're as thick as they will get. They're as tall as they will get, as green as they will get. So this is the midsummer time frame. So you got to understand that in the spring, a lot of these pike will be located in the back bays, skinny water, narrow areas where the water is going to warm up fast, where they can spawn. So these are going to be back bays like these areas that are circled here, or up these creeks in a couple of these different areas. But as the spring progresses and the water temperatures start to warm up, a lot of the big pike will push back out towards the main lake where the water is colder and deeper. Big pike, especially in the middle of summer, prefer water temps around 65 degrees. And a lot of times in the middle of summer, that's not going to be your surface temp. That's going to be temperatures that are down a little bit. And they also like to cruise over the deep water in the middle of the lake because that's where there's a ton of forage, especially big forage like whitefish, big schools of perch, schools of walleyes, whatever, going to be more oriented towards the main lake as a general rule of thumb. So when you're targeting big pike in the middle of summer, you want to first remember they're going to be usually closer to the middle of the lake where the deepest water is. That's step one, is locate the back bays where they were in the spring and generally rule them out and rule in anything that's in the vicinity of the main lake in the deep water. Okay, so now we have ruled out some areas that we have highlighted in red here as areas where the pike likely were in spawn, especially the bigger ones, but they're less likely to be there in midsummer. So instead, what you want to look for is areas that are near that main lake that are indents or bays in the shoreline that are somewhat prominent. So if you just look at any shoreline, you might find a little cut or a little spot where it goes in, but you want to find something that's a little bit more significant, kind of a bay, because more likely than not, these spots usually hold weeds. Now, I've marked a whole bunch of spots that look good to me, and one thing to always remember is that weeds are the name of the game for big pike in the middle of summer, especially cabbage. Sometimes if you don't have cabbage, you got to just work with whatever you have, but if you can find cabbage, which most of these lakes have plenty of, that's going to be your best target and your best magnet for big pike. However, again, it needs to be close to deep water. That's why in these red areas, I can almost guarantee you there's weeds there, but your odds of finding big pike there are reduced because they are so far back and so far away from that colder, deeper main lake water. They want to be near that, but they also want to have the weed beds that are close by for them to push up in and feed, or lie in there and wait in ambush, but their quick and easy access to deep water is right next to them, where they can go out and they can hang out in that preferred water temperature. All of these areas in green meet that criteria. They're on the main lake, small cuts and indents. You want to identify these spots first from an outside perspective. And then step 3 is going to be zooming in on Google Earth to see if they actually have weeds or not. In addition to those spots, there's a couple more spots that I've highlighted here that are more in the islands. These spots can be a little bit trickier, a little bit less intuitive to see because they're not a part of the shoreline necessarily. They're part of the islands. But there's a few nice little indents and bays in a couple of these islands that we're going to check out too and see if there's weeds there. All right, now that we have a whole bunch of spots kind of chosen, I'm going to go through some of them on Google Earth and zoom in and see if we can find weeds and show you how I would fish these spots. I'm not going to go through every spot because there's too many of them, but I've kind of gone through a number what I think are maybe like the best 6 spots, at least from the outside. And I'm going to zoom in on each one of these spots and see if there's weeds there and show you kind of how I would fish these spots. So on spot number 1 here, the reason I've chosen that as I think the most likely spot is because it is the biggest spot close to the main lake that I can see out of any of these. It's the largest location total. So when I zoom in on it, let's see if we can find some weeds. So in this area, I'm seeing some rocks, but if I look in here, there we go. There's some weeds right there. So I can already assume that there's going to be a weed bed that's along this shoreline with rocks incorporated in it too, which is going to be a really good spot. If we keep moving down, look, we see even more weeds. More weeds there. Go down the shoreline. I can see more weeds in here, down in this spot. And honestly, as we wrap this shoreline, I'm seeing weeds most of the way. By this big saddle right here, there's lots of weeds through here. Coming down, I can still see some patches. And again, there's going to be a lot more weeds here that you don't see under the water. Now, if we go back further into this bay, I'm seeing fewer weeds until we get in the back. And look, now we're seeing a whole bunch of weeds again. So you can see this whole area has a lot of weeds, which means that this whole area, to me, would be a very fishy spot. I would start probably out here and just work my way down, seeing where the weeds are, seeing if I'm finding any fish, whatever. You know, you got to kind of adjust as you hit these spots. But I'd be casting these spots with big spoons, big baits. I'd probably work at something like that. And that's almost 1.5 miles of area that I can work just in this one spot. So we can see there's weeds in a lot of these areas. So I guarantee you this would be a super productive pike spot in the middle of summer. Now location number 2 is also a pretty big spot on the main lake, but it's a lot smaller than that last spot. So this one should be pretty simple. So let's zoom in. And there we go. Instantly, we're seeing weeds again. We can see a nice weed edge that goes all the way down through here. Looks like it wraps this little island, and it even comes back into this bay. And I can even see where there's more on this side. So already, just by looking at it like that, I'm thinking this is already going to be a great pike spot. Again, I'd start from here, work along these weeds, something like this, down into here, hit that, and boom. There's almost 1/3 of a mile's worth of weeds that I can see here that I can already hit for pike. So spot number 2 is a lock. This one's confirmed. So spot 3 here looks pretty simple and straightforward. Nice bay right on the main lake, and you don't even have to zoom in much to see this one. Really defined weed edge. Now again, you don't know for sure what the weeds are going to look like, how deep they're going to be until you get there, but I can almost guarantee you there's going to be more weeds off deeper. You can probably already see how I would fish this. I would just hit this outside edge. Just like that. And again, not a huge spot here, maybe a little under 1/5 of a mile to cast, but this would be a great location. Also remember, you don't usually want to go way back in these bays for the pike in the middle of summer. Normally, the further back into here you go, the smaller the pike will get. Stick towards the outside edge, closer to the deep water. Now this 4th location is going to be kind of small. It's just going to be these 2 little indents right on the main lake. You can already see the weeds. So once again, confirmed spot. Hit this one like that. And if I were to go to this one, I would hit it just like that. Simple, easy, straightforward. 2 more pike spots confirmed. Now, spot number 5, this is that island spot. Now these spots are a little harder to find, but they actually, I find, can be some of the most productive spots. So there's one little spot up here on this island, and you can already see, look at that. It's exactly what I want to see is weeds. This spot, however, is kind of tiny. So this spot's going to be like you hit this spot for 5 minutes. You don't see anything good. You move on to the next one. The next one you would move on to would be maybe this one. You can see some weeds up here in this corner, and there's some weeds in the back as well. So this gives you a little bit of a bigger area to hit, but still fairly small Run and gun between these spots. Don't spend too much time there. And the same thing applies to this one down here. Also plenty of weeds. Hit this spot. Don't spend too much time here though if you're not seeing anything. Hit these 3 spots quick, back to back to back. So spot number 6 here. To me, this was the least good of the spots that I looked at. And if you're looking at it here, it's a little bit hard to tell because it looks like there's some wind when the satellite picture was taken. So it's hard to tell if there's actually weeds in here or not. I would guess that there would be, but I don't know for sure. So this spot wouldn't be on the top of my list. I can maybe see a little back there, but this spot wouldn't be top of list. Now, one thing you can do with Google Earth is sometimes you can click View, Show Historical Imagery, and it'll give you different satellite pictures to look at for this spot. So let's check and see if 2022 gives us any clarity, which it does not. It is in the winter. So the winter can be good for certain things, which I'll go through more if I do a walleye video like this, but it doesn't help you with weeds, obviously. 2019, unfortunately, this one, I can't tell much either. It's just too blurry. In 1985, you're not going to be able to tell anything from there. So I'd say this spot, I would maybe check it, but it wouldn't be on the top priority list. Well, there you have it. That's a super in-depth look as to how I would approach looking at these lakes on satellite imagery to find pike in Canada in midsummer. Now, this can have a little bit of a tricky thing in certain lakes because sometimes satellite imagery isn't that great and you might not have a good picture for it, which is why Google Earth is nice because it has that historical imagery. But sometimes you just can't find the right image. So you can always try different satellite applications, but to me, Google Earth is usually the best. So this is how I would approach Pac-Man Lake. Hopefully you guys learned something and hopefully you take something from this video and you can apply this to pretty much any lake in Canada.